When Julie and I first saw the house, we fell in love. It was an old Victorian on the outskirts of Savannah, Georgia, standing tall and proud despite its dilapidated state. The peeling paint and overgrown garden seemed like minor issues compared to the charm it radiated. We saw potential, a future where we could restore it to its former glory. "This place is going to be amazing, Jules," I said, squeezing her hand as we stood on the creaky front porch. She smiled, her eyes shining with excitement.
"I can't wait to get started,"
she replied, her voice filled with determination. We moved in that weekend, our heads full of renovation plans. The first night, we sat in the living room, surrounded by boxes, sipping wine and dreaming aloud about the transformations we'd make. Little did we know, the house had its own plans for us. The first dream came that night. I found myself in a dark, narrow hallway. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the walls seemed to close in on me. Faint whispers echoed around me, growing louder as I walked forward. I turned a corner and saw a door at the end of the hall. Just as I reached out to open it, I woke up drenched in sweat. Julia had a similar dream. She described walking through endless corridors, hearing cries for help, but never finding the source. We laughed it off the next morning, attributing it to the stress of moving and the house's eerie atmosphere. But the dreams didn't stop. Each night they became more vivid, more disturbing. I saw patients strapped to beds, their eyes wide with terror as faceless doctors performed grotesque experiments. Julia dreamt of a woman screaming in agony, her voice echoing through the halls. "This place is seriously messing with my head," I said one morning over breakfast, my hands shaking as I poured coffee.
"Mine too."
Julia replied, her face pale.
"It feels so real, Mark, like it's actually happening."
Determined to get to the bottom of it, we started digging into the house's history. What we found was more horrific than we could have imagined. The house had once been a sanatorium, a place where patients were subjected to unethical experiments designed to manipulate dreams. The doctors, it seemed, were obsessed with understanding and controlling the subconscious mind, pushing their patients to the brink of insanity. It started with an old newspaper clipping we found in the attic, yellowed with age. The headline read, "Sanatorium closed amid scandal of unethical practices." Beneath it, a grainy photo showed the house in its former glory, surrounded by a tall iron fence. The article detailed the horrific experiments conducted by Dr. Alexander Greaves, a once renowned psychiatrist turned mad scientist. Dr. Greaves believed that by controlling dreams, he could unlock the true potential of the human mind. His methods were as brutal as they were unorthodox. Patients were subjected to prolonged sensory deprivation, confined in dark, silent rooms for days on end. They were given hallucinogenic drugs, forced to confront their deepest fears and traumas. Electroshock therapy was administered not to cure, but to heighten their mental state, pushing them to the edge of madness. The worst experiment, however, was the dream synchronization. Patients were strapped into a crude contraption, electrodes attached to their temples. They were put into a drug-induced coma and linked to a machine that synchronized their brainwaves with those of others undergoing the same procedure. The goal was to create a shared dreamscape, a collective subconscious where the doctors could manipulate and observe their subjects. The results were catastrophic. Patients experienced terrifying, shared hallucinations, their minds merging into a nightmarish hive consciousness. They screamed of seeing monstrous figures, twisted versions of themselves and others. Many never woke up, their minds lost in the labyrinthine horrors of their shared dreams. As we uncovered these details, the dreams intensified. It was as if the house was feeding on our fear, growing stronger with each passing night. I saw myself in the dreams now, not as an observer but as a participant. I was one of the doctors, my hands stained with blood as I carried out the experiments. I could feel the cold metal of the electrodes, hear the hum of the machines, and see the terror in the patient's eyes as I initiated the procedures. Julia's dreams were even worse. She became one of the patients, her pleas for mercy falling on deaf ears. She felt the cold straps binding her to the bed, the sharp sting of the needles as they injected the hallucinogens, the agonizing jolt of electricity coursing through her body. The shared dreamscape she entered was a hellish landscape of twisted memories and monstrous figures, all of them reflections of the pain and fear imprinted on the house itself. It was as if the house had absorbed the anguish of those tortured within its walls, the very structure becoming a vessel for their suffering. The walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, the air thick with the echoes of their screams. The basement, where many of the experiments took place, was the epicenter. The atmosphere there was stifling, a tangible sense of dread that made it hard to breathe. One night, while exploring the basement, we found an old journal hidden behind a loose brick. It belonged to Dr. Greaves, its pages filled with meticulous notes on his experiments. The final entry was particularly chilling. "I have seen the depths of the human mind, the darkness that lies within us all. The house has become a conduit for this darkness, a repository of nightmares. I fear it has taken on a life of its own, feeding on the fear and pain of those within. It is a door to a place beyond our understanding, a realm of pure terror. God help anyone who steps through it." The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that the house itself was an entity, a sentient being nourished by the suffering it had witnessed. The dreams were not just memories of the past, but manifestations of the house's insatiable hunger for fear. And now it had set its sights on us. Our waking hours became a blur of exhaustion and paranoia. We started hearing things, soft whispers, footsteps in empty rooms, the faint sound of crying. The house seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, its walls alive with the memories of the past.
I can't fucking take this anymore, Mark.
Julia said one night, tears streaming down her face.
We need to get out of here.
"We can't just leave," I replied, though deep down I felt the same dread gnawing at my soul. There has to be a way to stop this. We've already invested too much money into this. We have nowhere to go. Desperation drove us to seek out any means to break the cycle. We tried everything, smudging the house with sage, placing protective charms in every room, and even consulting with a local paranormal expert. Nothing worked. The dreams continued, relentless and brutal. The house was not just haunted, it was alive, a sentient being feeding on our fear and despair. And we were trapped within its goddamn walls, our minds slowly unraveling as the house tightened its grip. One night, the dreams reached a fever pitch. I found myself in that same hallway, the whispers now a deafening roar. The door at the end beckoned me, and I knew I had to open it. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle, and as I turned it, a blinding light engulfed me. When I woke up, Julia was gone. I searched the house frantically, calling her name, but there was no response. Panic set in as I realized that the dream had taken her, pulling her into its twisted reality. I stumbled into the living room, my vision blurred with tears. There, on the coffee table, was a note in Julia's handwriting. It read,
I'm sorry, Mark. I had to go. I couldn't fight it anymore.
Days turned into weeks, and I continued to search for a way to bring Julia back, to break free from the house's grip. But every night the dreams pulled me deeper into their dark embrace. I saw Julia trapped in a nightmarish version of the house, her eyes pleading for help. I realized then that the house wasn't just haunted by the spirits of its past. It was alive, a sentient entity feeding on our fears and despair. It had consumed the patients, the doctors, and now it was consuming us. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. Each night, the line between dream and reality blurs further, and I fear that soon I won't be able to tell the difference. The house of forgotten dreams has claimed us, and there is no escape. As I sit here writing this, I can hear the whispers growing louder. The door at the end of the hallway is waiting, and I know that once I open it, there will be no turning back. But maybe, just maybe, if someone reads this, they'll understand. They'll know to stay away from this cursed place. And perhaps they'll find a way to break the cycle that has trapped so many before us. The house is calling. I can feel its pull, stronger than ever. I'm going to open the door now, pray that I find Julia and that we can escape this nightmare together. Or pray that we don't.